I'm going to share with you the journey that the Good Samaritan Society has been on to help illustrate how we've been innovating over our past 94 years. But let me tell you a quick little story about the society. Our beginnings began in a little town called Arthur, North Dakota, outside of Fargo, if you know where that might be, or perhaps you've heard of the movie. Our founder happened to be a Lutheran minister who, upon graduating from seminary, said, "Send me to a place nobody else wants to go." So they sent him to Arthur, North Dakota. He served 2 parishes in a horse and buggy. And one day, literally one day, a little boy by the name of Christian was left at his doorstep. This little boy had what appeared to be the onset of polio. And he asked his parishioners if they would each contribute 2 cents to the care of Christian, was his name, and they'd send him off to Kansas City where some early work was being done in that area. And there was enough money left over, some $2,000, which was a lot of money back in 1922, and they started a 6-room house to care for children. And one day, an elderly person faked a handicap so he might also find care there, and the Good Samaritan Society was born. Today, as we grow into our mission and ministry, we operate under what we call our 3 O's. Our obligation, being faith-based, we share God's love in word and deed. We look for the opportunity in which we can help people fulfill their well-being, and whatever that might look like, and wherever that might look like, which has been a bit of an innovation for us, understanding ourselves different other than bricks and mortar or locations. And ultimately, as we share with our 21,000 coworkers across the country, if you can make somebody feel loved, valued, and at peace, that's our desired outcome as an organization. We're located in 24 different states. We serve some 27,000 plus people every day. We do so in various lines of service, rehab skilled. We have some 165 facilities, locations in 24 states. We have some various housing across the country as well, some 35 HUD properties, affordable housing, 100 or so locations of assisted living and senior living. We also continue to grow in the area of home and community-based services. We have over 50 locations in 14 different states out of those 24. I share those numbers only as that. In fact, internally, we're talking about how else do we want to describe ourselves, as we all typically do, by numbers, units, how many beds, 9,000 some skilled beds. Well, what does that really all matter? We're moving to talk about how do we touch people's lives? How many people are we serving? Because that's changing. It isn't necessarily based on location anymore. We're finding that technology is enabling us as an organization to touch more lives in places, quite frankly, where we don't have a physical presence. And I'll talk about that in a moment. We do that through our innovative areas, and some of these are depicted there, Living Well at Home, of which I'll talk about here momentarily. We also look at our Connection Center, in which we empower people in finding locations, but also helping them with everyday life situations. And we've also been working on what's called Window to the World, among other things. And I'll share more about that here momentarily. So, the design process that we use. We worked with a group called Peer Insight some years ago, and we began looking at what kind of model do we want to build our innovation, research and innovation center around, of which we began about 2004 actually. This is a design model used by, as our previous speaker was referencing, Procter & Gamble. It's a design model used by United Health. AARP uses this as well as they look to innovate. So you look at defining the problem, and you do that by studying what's happening in people's lives. And so we're very in tune to not just listening, but going, observing, and being in people's homes and talking to them and talking to family caregivers, and really discern what is happening in their lives. And then we began to look at ways in which we can explore possibilities. What possibilities might there be? A lot of brainstorming, engaging them as consumers, listening to the customer of what they would like, and then we begin to test different models, different approaches, and we go about in a beta and an alpha testing until we get to a business plan in which we're testing in the market and then move that forward and then repeat the cycle. It's very much centric around the consumer. It's very much centric around visiting with them, being in their presence, looking at their flows in life, listening to areas and gaps that perhaps aren't being met. Our journey, this is a busy little slide, our journey has been one of quite an interesting time for us. We've enjoyed the process and we continue to learn. By no means could I say that we've arrived, but as we look to be an innovative organization, and we want to continue to be over these 93 years and plus now, we need to be continuing to look at how we journey. We really began in '04 with an opportunity with the University of Virginia. Happened to be a technology run that they were making. They have an area where they look at innovative ways in which they serve populations. We began partnering with the Volunteers of America, formed an LLC, and began and worked with a group called Well Aware. Happened to be a technology company. We became an investor, which was kind of unique as a not-for-profit organization, along with venture capitalists as well. And we worked over those years in developing that product. What was interesting about that is we learned and we began innovating around that, was that we discovered we're not a technology company, we're a platform company. And we began our Living Well at Home platform out of that. And we did so by investigating through our design thinking process of where the best is occurring in that way. So our board of directors spent time at 3M. Our board of directors spent time at United Health looking at their models and their processes of how they innovate. We engaged the Helmsley Trust and secured an $8 million grant in which we began to build out and launch what we call Living Well at Home, and I'll show you that momentarily. We furthered our development and continued with the research through the University of Minnesota on studying what happens in people's lives when you introduce platform technologies that help the family caregiver, of which there's some 42 million of them out there, as well as ways in which we can support, obviously, the individual maintaining their independence of wherever they call home. And I say that because that's disruptive. We often think of, well, how do we get them to come to our locations? Well, we've long shifted our thinking. It's not about locations. It's not about brick and mortar. It's how we move what we do best to wherever they want to be. And we take that challenge very seriously. It's counterintuitive, but as our previous presenter just showed what happened to Kodak and IBM and others, that happens to us if we're not willing to move and use technology and platforms for an organization to change. We furthered that model development with a $5.3 million Cargill grant. We began introducing a coaching model to that. We began bringing physician groups into some modeling as to how we might take their toughest patients that they're seeing in their clinics and support them in home and support the physician clinics to help them stay at home and avoiding expensive health care. We furthered the journey along as our foundation continues to fuel this area for us within the Good Samaritan Society. And you can see listed there in the lower right corner some of the various activities that we're about currently within our Vivo innovation efforts. As I transition into a little video I want to show to you, one of the things that I have discovered in being in this role for, well, 38 years in the organization, 13 years in this particular role, that if you're going to be an innovative organization, you need to be very, very clear about your vision. You need to articulate that constantly, and perhaps that's not new news to you, but I found it to be true. Secondly, what I have found to be true as well in looking for innovation is continuing to ask within the organization, where is our learning coming from? Where are we learning? Often think that innovation doesn't necessarily happen within our Vivo Innovation Center, or doesn't necessarily happen in my office. It really happens within the margins of the organization. That's where the creative thinking is, and creating a culture for that. And thirdly, I think an organization that's strong in innovation needs to ask the question is, how is your talent? So if you don't have that clear vision, if you don't identify where the learning is occurring, you don't have the talent to execute on that, you'll struggle. And we've continued to focus on those important areas. Let me share a quick video as to some of the journey we've been on, and it further describes some of those initiatives that I spoke to you about here. As I think about innovation in general, we all know that today is different than yesterday. We say that, but often we don't realize how things actually are changing and how we need to evolve as an organization of sharing God's love, being mission-driven in new and different ways in a changing world.
It's so important for Good Samaritan to be creating new services to support families, informal family caregivers, seniors. They need us. Aging is not the experience that it should be today. And so we're called, we have a responsibility to create new services, new supports that enable well-being into the future.
A couple of calls that I've taken, you can tell they're just desperate, like they're out of options. She feels lonely. She is looking for housing, but she's not ready to leave her home yet because there's too many memories. She actually told me I'm a godsend because she doesn't have a lot of contact with their kids anymore.
They just appreciate a phone call and that they're lonely and they just want someone to talk to sometimes.
We, I think, touch a deep human need, and that is to be listened to matter, to have a purpose. I think that's what we do.
There are 42 million caregivers in this country caring for a senior in their lives. It's exciting to think about the opportunity that Good Samaritan has to embrace that community and to come alongside them with new services.
A lot of family caregivers are really in that sandwich generation where they're trying to support their own career and their kids and their parents all at the same time. And so I think that there's a real opportunity for the society to think about how it is that we can help them support the people that they care about.
As our population ages, many people want to live independently in their own homes. With that independence also comes the risk of becoming isolated. So the Window to the World solution provides a way through technology and through service to support people that want to live in their home independently, but also help them stay connected to the things that make them thrive. Window to the World originated when a congregation reached out to our Vivo Innovation group wanting to find ways that they might be able to serve their congregation. So originally Vivo went out to Rapid City and we did home observations where we talked with the seniors, did interviews. We did several small experiments. We looked at different case studies at isolation and aging and what that means and what that looks like.
There's my table. That's my table. Carol.
We also want to do some additional interviews with caregivers and family members to learn more about what they are expecting from this service. What would they like to pay? What kinds of reports and evidence do they want to see?
Living Well at Home, I think, was one of the first initiatives that we grabbed onto as we thought and matured that we can make a difference in new and other ways other than how we've thought about ourselves in the past.
The vision of Living Well at Home is to really be the premier provider of remote patient monitoring. It includes our Living Well Center, and they are the heart of the entire vision, the people that make the connections and who look at the information that is brought to us and interpreted and then delivering it to the consumer on the other side. The persons that are being monitored express a great satisfaction with the interaction that they receive and are able to tell us that in their past experiences that they might have been going to the hospital a lot, and now that since they've had Living Well at Home, they haven't had to do that.
People are coming to us looking for answers, looking for help, looking for coaching. They're seeing us as being in new spaces, new ideas, new ways of thinking. And as we want to further continue that, we want to put more resources and efforts to broaden our own thinking and listen to the consumer as to how they need to be helped. We lead in the sense of first God calling us to this work, and we do it humbly in service to one another, and we do it through innovative ways as we collectively think and carry out this mission work together. What we have found in now our connection center with nearly 25,000 people calling us annually, that people are lonely. They're lost. They don't know what to do. These aren't just adult caregivers, but these are the actual persons that we all care for. We're learning as we listen to those phone calls. It isn't necessarily just looking for a location. It's looking for solving problems like my heat doesn't work, or my family isn't taking care of me. I've lost connection. Perhaps some other connection centers, well, might say I can't help you with that, or we don't have a location in that particular area. But we've made the commitment, whatever call we receive, we hang on to that call and we follow it through the end. We have about 8 touch points with every caller throughout the year. If it's another service that they need that perhaps we don't provide, we will secure that for them. We think that's the right thing to do, and it really begins to open our eyes to what the marketplace is wanting and how we need to change and move our organization in those spaces. Within the Good Samaritan Society, we simply define innovation as making meaningful change. It's as simple as that. It's also as complicated as that sometimes. It really has been a time for me in these last 13 years, having been in the profession as long as I have, to force myself to think differently. How do I say yes instead of no? How do I say how instead of, well, we tried that once? To really create that culture in which innovation can occur. And making sure that each and every one of our 21,000 staff members, and perhaps within your locations as well, sees themselves in that change. Unless you empower each and every one of those persons and embrace every idea as perhaps the best idea you're going to get that day, you're going to fail. At least that's what I have found to be true. It's not a location, an innovation center that creates all of this thinking. It's everyone's participation. And as I said earlier, it happens within the margins of an organization. It's got to be something that all employees find as theirs, that they make it, they own it. It's something they can brag about and participate in. One of the things that I have learned over these years as a CEO and earlier as administrator of various locations within the society is that I've never learned a thing by talking. I've always learned by listening. Innovation is listening. It's not talking. It's not even doing. Sometimes it's just listening to understand what's happening in people's lives, and then how can you move to make those changes. And so when we talk about the baby boomers, Gen X, the millenniums, how they think and how they operate, for me, that's not the discussion. The discussion is how do we listen? How do we listen to all of those people? How do we engage all of those people so that they're a part of something bigger than themselves? If we don't, we're really going to lose the opportunity that our organizations have. If you somehow can harness and engage all of your people into that vision, then your organization can become what it otherwise can't unless you do. And it's important that all people are part of this and that we see our profession not just in elder care, but all of the people that come along to us and the communities that we serve. We're spending a lot of time in population health these days and understanding what that means. 20% is genetic, 20% happens within the face-to-face contact of your physician or being in the hospital. The 60% occurs outside of all of that, how we live our lives. So how do we move our organization into that 60%? I'm going to close with a video that I think is a calling to all of us within this profession of how we care for people who are on this journey, how we care for ourselves on this journey, how we need to think differently, how we need to see things differently. This is not just something that we do that is kind of important, but when you're touching people's lives, it's the most important. I'll close with this video.
Look at me. What do you see? A child who saw animals in the clouds? A teenager who viewed the rest of us as mere mortals? A mother who somehow made it to being grandma? A visitor to Omaha, the beach, not the town. Or do you see what you so fear? Yourself in 10 or 20 or 30 years. Who will I be, you wonder, when I no longer do what I once did, and my body is no longer what it once was? Maybe it's time we all stopped being so afraid of getting old and cherish life for the remarkable journey it has been and that is still to come. For only then can we open our minds to living with new meaning and purpose, and fill in our spiritual blanks, and perhaps for the first time, truly experience the presence of God. The way we see it, it's not about dying, it's about living the whole of life, and recognizing that in each of us, there is a friend to be made, a story to be told, wisdom to be learned, from someone who deserves to feel loved and valued and treated with dignity, even if they need help doing the most basic of things. As Christians, neither we nor Christ would have it any other way. Old age is not something to be just celebrated with greeting cards, but with all our hearts and souls. For there, with the grace of God, goes each of us.
Our journey continues. Let's innovate. Thank you.